It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater, and welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. Her success story, for those who are just tuning in, is all about amazing leaders, many of them dynamic, accomplished women who have done amazing things in their careers and, most importantly, in their lives. And we have an opportunity to learn about them, to hear about what they've done, and to see how we can take that as inspiration for what we can do forward. I can tell you, I started this for myself because I love to learn from others. And I've always said the day I stop learning is the day I'm done, period. So I love to learn from amazing women. And today I introduce you to Poonam Sharma. She's an author, speaker, board member, podcast host herself, serial entrepreneur with a passion for innovating around the built world. She's the founder of Stealth Force, the gig economy commercial real estate, which was she successfully exited in 2019. So Poonam, thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story. And as we wave across New York City, as we're both located here, it's great to see you.
Thank you for having me, Ivy. I'm looking forward to it.
So share with us a little bit about your early career, like what you drove by getting involved in real estate. Where was that driving force and what was that about that industry that drove you?
I think it's interesting. You and I were chatting a little bit in pre-call about this. I don't know any really successful woman or person who knew how their story was going to go. You can look back and you can draw the thread.
Yeah.
But I'm the daughter of immigrants. Immigrants from India back then didn't put their money in the stock market, they put it into real estate. So I grew up walking around construction sites with my father, right? And that was kind of the backdrop of what made sense to me. So then I went to college and grad school and came out, and I knew that on some level I would end up in real estate. And that's kind of where I started it all. So I started originally, I worked at a company called GLG, Gerson
Yeah.
Lehrman Group. I was employee 13 there when it was sort of a startup. Did that for a couple of years, did my writing on the side, which I always thought, again, would be secondary, because back then in the 90s, it wasn't the world it is now where you could do everything. You had to pick a lane. You had to stick to it, right? So I went to GLG, worked there for a bunch of years, was writing on the side, then went to business school and said, it's time to straighten up and fly right and go into real estate. So I worked for the next 10 plus years in real estate, did real estate development, real estate private equity, and then eventually jumped into real estate tech with a startup.
So real estate tech that I eventually learned very often they call prop tech.
Yes.
What was it like moving from like the development side to the technology side? And what drove you to actually take that leap in that early stage?
Well, I think there was always a thread of entrepreneurship for me, not tech, but entrepreneurship, because my
Okay.
my parents were very entrepreneurial and started multiple companies. By the time I was in college, I had seen them start companies, almost take them public, go chapter 11 instead, start again, everything from a restaurant to a HVAC contracting business, to a hotel, sort of across the board. And so this idea of being entrepreneurial made sense to me. When I was in college, I wrote a guide to how to start your own business, which is my first
Really?
book through John Wiley and Sons. It was called the Harvard Entrepreneurs Club Guide to Starting Your Own Business because I was the director of the Entrepreneurs Club on campus back when people in college weren't doing that sort of thing. So I wrote that book in 99. And then I wrote another book called Chasing Success, where I interviewed really successful Harvard alumni who are entrepreneurs all around the world and asked them and their spouses and their college roommates and their first investors about everything that went wrong before the company that made it big. So it was people like the founder of Castle Rock Entertainment, the founder of Trellix, who invented the spreadsheet, Esther
Wow.
Dyson, all these really amazing people
That
who
had to
really
be
had no
fascinating.
business
I would have
talking.
loved to be able to fly on the wall listening to
Yeah.
those interviews.
Oh, Egon Zender, who kind of pioneered executive search. All these people who really had no business talking to me, but did me a favor and took my call. And so that was always in the background. I switched to writing fiction later, but I had written these books and been in the world of entrepreneurship. So fast forward, I'm working in real estate private equity, and I just see a need. And at the time, bringing on the tech piece was something you did through a CTO. You didn't need to be a programmer yourself, which I'm not. So I kind of put the pieces together. My father's a real estate developer. I developed the business.
So as that exit,
Mhm.
okay, so you had a very successful exit.
A small one, but yes, an exit
Okay.
is an exit.
And what led you to the next steps? Like how have you went from that the exit, right? From that sale to where you are today?
Well, I've always followed the next opportunity, I would say. I don't think there was a clear prescription for my life. Truthfully, I don't think there's a clear prescription for
I don't
anybody's
think there's a clear prescription for anyone's life. I'm
life.
waiting to see that
People
prescription for my own.
right, but people tell themselves there is, and I never really even told myself there was. There were a couple of obvious choices. Get into the best schools you can, right? Don't do drugs. But beyond that, there are not a lot of clear prescriptions, right? So I would say I had always been doing some public speaking. Somewhere along the way, I went from writing business books to writing fiction. I went through a lot of turmoil in my mid 20s. I had a boyfriend who passed away. I started writing fiction. And, comedy equals tragedy plus time, kind of Carol
Yep.
Burnett's thing. So I started writing fiction, and I think that made me even more comfortable with public speaking because I'd been doing it in the
Okay.
real estate industry. But that's when I started to just talk about life. And I found a much better reception in that. So I think in doing all of that, I became so comfortable with public speaking that I found myself up on stage very early on when the prop tech industry was not called prop tech, it was called real estate technology. And there were
Right.
75 people at the conference, right? Now there's thousands, but
Now
there's
there's thousands.
75 people. The first CRETech conference in San Francisco, the after party was in the founder's apartment, And so if I'm one of the few people there who's up on stage and one of the few women who's up on stage
Exactly.
because I never have a problem with it, I mean, I'm up there. What are you going to do? Not listen to me? Then it becomes easy to figure out what your next step's going to be because once you become visible, the opportunities come to you. And people ask all the time, where do the board role? How do you get a board role? And I'm like, you don't get a board role. The board role comes to you. By and large, it comes to you. Long way of saying that after exiting that startup, I was raising money to launch another startup, which was going to be called Raise Co-working. Co-working in New York City with fully licensed childcare on site. And I had a partnership with the largest publicly traded childcare company in the world, and they were going to invest equity, and we were ready to go. The week I'm ready to launch, and by the way, at that point, I'm like 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant,
Of course.
lockdown happens in New York City.
Okay.
So when that happened, I shut everything down, went in and gave birth, and survived the pandemic like everybody else with my martinis and sourdough bread. And somewhere there in the depths of the pandemic, started getting phone calls around additional board roles because I was visible in the industry. So the visibility really saved me.
Visibility, I'm hearing this theme of visibility is key.
Mhm. It's absolutely key. And I think a lot of women have trouble putting themselves out there. I think it's not because they don't think they have the goods. I think it's because they've been taught humility is a virtue. Modesty is a virtue, right? There's humility and then there's modesty. They've been taught modesty is some sort of a virtue to pursue. I'm not sure that it is. Humility, yes.
Well, I think as you say that, in my generation, a few older than you, I remember being brought up with, be a lady, be a lady, be ladylike, be a lady.
Right.
So, what did that mean? That didn't mean not speak up, but
Yeah.
it also meant that there was so much unknown there. It's like, oh, be a lady. So let me like sit here quietly and look
Mm,
lovely, and
mhm,
that might have been several generations ago. But that trickle down effect was be ladylike and be a lady. That now that doesn't mean you cannot speak out and speak clearly. That was never said, but there was
mm.
this illusion to being a lady of being demure.
Yeah. There's so much also, I think, around kind of generational, don't want to call it trauma, but family lore around the way we're supposed to behave that we don't understand the origins of. And
It's
it
true.
takes till mid-age to start thinking about it. I spoke with someone recently who was telling me about the idea of the turkey with the two ends cut off. Have you heard this story?
No.
It's a great story. It's so illustrative. She said there's like a fable or whatever
Right.
about a child who is in the kitchen and the mother is about to put turkey in the oven and she cuts off both ends and puts it in the oven. The child says, "Why did you cut off both ends?" And she says, "I don't know. That's the way we do it. Ask grandma." Goes to grandma. Why do you cut off both ends? I don't know. I guess maybe great grandma. Somehow the story comes through. The reason great grandma would cut off both ends is because they didn't have an oven big enough to fit a whole turkey. And so we're losing turkey, right? And it stayed with me because I was thinking, like to your point, maybe the reason you had to be ladylike was because there was a real cost 5 generations ago in your family
Exactly.
not being a lady. Maybe it was considered untoward. Maybe it was, oh, you're going to besmirch your reputation. I have something similar in my family where I realized this recently. People talk about the weaponization of this concept of being a lady. And if you look at the through line of your life,
Yeah.
from the outside, nobody would think that I'm not comfortable putting myself front and center because who does keynotes who's not comfortable? But I know a lot of keynote speakers who will talk about this other aspect, which is taking the stage when you feel like you have something valuable to say. But if you need to nominate yourself for the top speaker, you don't do it. You hope someone else will. You step just left
Just
of
to that
spotlight,
side.
just left of spotlight because it's considered gross. Why is it considered gross? And I really spent some time talking to my mother about it. And what I've realized is, for us at least, working really hard was really important in my
Yeah.
family. Being super grateful for everything that came your way as a result, and always remembering somebody else worked equally hard. So God was shining on you. You were blessed to get that thing. But why? Why? Why do you always have to not talk about it? Because of the concept of the evil eye. There is this concept that you should not ever say that your baby looks beautiful because 10 generations ago, so many babies died young. What if somebody thinks evil thoughts about your child? Or what if your child coughs? And what if your child dies? This is village thought from 100 years ago in India. But the
It
modesty becomes painful and the humility becomes self defeating, and we're stepping left of spotlight, you know?
it happens to be very true, and I think this is cross-cultural,
Hmm.
without a
Hmm.
doubt, because your background and my background, heritage-wise, might look different.
Yeah.
But the second you said the evil eye, and the second you shared that story, I had my mother who's passed by now, in my ear,
Right.
saying, "A red ribbon, put a red ribbon, high
Right.
ribbon it, right? So nobody should say anything, right? The evil the same concept. And that's the same when my grandmother passed many, many, many years ago. My grandfather came to live with us as was the not unusual
Oh, yeah.
situation at
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my mom, I was like, "Mom, why are you making like boiled chicken in a pot? It's gross." And she said, "Grandpa loves it. My mother made it for him my entire life." So
Mm.
then, being a little spunky kid, I went to my grandfather. I said, "So you really love mom's chicken in a pot?" And he goes, "Oh God, your grandmother made it for me every Friday night religiously. I wish your mother would make something else." You see what I mean?
See
So
what I
it's
mean?
that,
We don't
and that's
question.
truth. This is a true story. I'm not making this story up. This is a
Yeah.
true story. It comes down, and we do what we've learned.
Yes. And sometimes it serves us and sometimes it doesn't. That's a lot of what I focus on these days is I don't think we got it wrong. I don't think people who grew up in the 80s, 90s got it wrong, but I do think the world is open to more now,
Yeah,
right? And what served us then wasn't necessarily always just for survival. It wasn't always a trauma response. Not everything is that complicated. I didn't wear red lipstick in the office when I was 19 because the 45-year-old managing directors would flirt with me. and they were gross. That's why.
Yeah.
But not because of a trauma, but just because of practicality. We were a very practical generation. And now I think a lot of us are waking up and thinking, well, what do I want with my second half? So it's important to look back and query all of this and think, It's good. I'm glad I did what I did to get where I am.
Yeah.
And now what?
So let me ask you this. So where are you now in your second half?
I'm at peace. I'm really at peace. I mean, I've been through a crazy handful of years. I've got two amazing children. Like every mom, I got the best kids in the world. I
Best
got
kids in the world.
like
Even better
every
granddaughter in the world.
yeah,
Once
yeah.
that comes, it so trumps those kids.
I can't wait. I mean, I can wait.
Well,
I
wait.
can wait, but I can't wait, you know? And they're scrumptious and I'm healthy and I'm peaceful and I'm living in New York City and basically focused on my board roles. It's been really nice to hit that moment of almost semi-retirement. So I'm still working on some real estate projects with my family, but mainly focused on the board roles. And I have been called, I think, sort of as an outgrowth of the public speaking, to start providing sort of coaching services to people. You know, once in a while, people have come to me, and what I found is I never thought of myself in that category because I thought of it as very functional, very
Right.
taskmaster ish. But the people that have come to me have been people who don't need a taskmaster for anything. These are people who need to release a thought, release a way of thinking about things, release a bit of a cornerstone of the way they're framing themselves and their place in the world so that they can then access more of themselves. And it's been really satisfying because, frankly, it feels like growth for myself.
I will say every client I work with for over 17 years now,
Mhm.
I have grown and grown and grown by being in the work and by opening myself up for their growth, I grow.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't think you can do any kind of humanity focused work without caring about the people that you're talking to, right? I don't think you can really be an effective therapist, trauma therapist, anything, you know what I mean? Coach, anything, if you don't get into the story and get into what they're doing and decide you want to make a change for them, right? Because of that satisfaction. It's almost how you feel when you see your friends going through their things,
Exactly.
right?
So I want to ask you, you did a keynote
Mhm.
called The Ultimate Permission Slip. And I have to tell you, I love, love, love that title.
Thank you.
What brought you to go there, to go and then deliver the ultimate permission slip? What is that about for you?
I've been speaking at real estate conferences and women's conferences. I was asked to give a keynote to a group, and they said, we don't want you to talk about real estate. This is a real estate group, but we want you to talk about real estate. They said, our feedback has been that we have gotten speakers who keynote, who talk about swimming the English Channel or climbing Everest or whatever it is. And it's very inspiring. But the feedback we get from our attendees is, but I don't relate to that person. So we want someone who they relate to, who's from their industry, but who can talk about something unrelated to their industry. What do you got? And I said, well, the pandemic was interesting for me like it was for everyone else. I can talk about that. They said, go. I said, I'm thinking about cognitive dissonance. I'm thinking about life change. And they were like, go, 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 go. They gave me a very long leash. And they also gave me about 45 minutes. So, what I ended up talking about was a concept that was nice. It crystallized in my mind something I went through. The ultimate permission slip in a nutshell is when you finally give yourself the right to rid a core part of yourself of the cognitive dissonance that it takes to stay in situations that don't work for you. But the ripple effect of that is so intense that you wake up allergic to cognitive dissonance in any other area of your life. So, for me, for example,
Okay.
I was married, I was pregnant, and I was giving birth in the pandemic. Through a set of circumstances, I had what felt like a near death experience giving birth under lockdown, came home and realized my marriage was not a marriage. And it wasn't about fault, it was about reality. So I needed to exit stage left, and I needed to be my full self for myself as much as for my children, and that everything would be
Yeah.
great and better. That was a big deal. I come from a
It
community
is a big
where
deal.
people don't do that. People don't get divorced unless there's violence or something, whatever. But being in a marriage that's not a marriage is not a good enough reason to leave. For me, it was. And I had my crisis moment, and
And
I'm
it should
grateful.
be.
It should be, but a lot of people
It
don't think
should be
that.
being in a marriage that is not a marriage, being in a relationship that doesn't truly serve two people. If we're in
Mhm.
a friendship and it's not serving us, don't we exit that friendship? And yes, a marriage is much more, yet a marriage should be based on a friendship.
Exactly. And I think this is something a lot of women don't get. If you're not okay, your kids are not okay.
Yeah.
That's it. It's very simple. And so long story short is that I left, but what I found was I didn't know my plan, but I felt so clearly that every time you jump without a plan, it's almost as if the ground rises to meet your feet. It's not perfect, it's hard, it's unpleasant, but it's so worth it. And never once do you regret a decision where you're putting yourself back in a place where your life is yours. It makes sense to you.
Right.
And so the ultimate permission slip was my sort of massive realization that no matter whatever happened after that, I felt like I had been real. I felt like I had righted my ship. And getting back into your own skin when you don't realize you were out of it is so powerful. So that cognitive dissonance that's required, which cognitive dissonance is when who you are and what you need to exist as whole is in conflict with the life you are living. Talk about being in the marriage that doesn't serve you, right? Once you leave, you kind of find that you're allergic to cognitive dissonance in every other area of your life because it just doesn't make sense to look in the mirror and not be honest with yourself.
Well, I think once we make a decision, there's a ripple impact of that decision.
Sure. It's
Or once we
beautiful.
have an awakening, there's
Yeah.
a ripple impact of the awakening and whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And so it's
So,
an ultimate permission slip because maybe you weren't even looking for permission, but now you realize, oh, wow, I never needed anybody's permission in any way, shape, or form. Frankly, I didn't even need my own. I just needed to be honest.
right.
That's it.
So, where are you today and what's next for you?
I am, like I said, very much at peace.
I love it.
I think honestly, and it's a sort of a funny thing to say on a business related podcast, but it's so important. I think we spend so much of our lives as women compartmentalized. Here's how I feel about relationships. Here's how I feel about this. I'm confident in this. I'm not confident in that. It's all nonsense. You're one person. You were always one person. And this midlife combination and decompartmentalization of everything gives you so much peace if you decide to be honest with yourself. You start to be gentle with yourself, right? You look at your wrinkles and you think, oh, who's a cutie who looks like a little bit of a little old lady? Oh, I can see my grandma. I can see my grandma in the mirror a little bit. It's just a whole different approach. So that gives me such a deep peace. My kids give me peace, knowing that they're okay and that these are the moments you're going to miss. Gives me a lot of peace. When it comes to work, I serve on both public and private boards. I love that work. I'm, probably bringing on one more board role, getting ready to do one hopefully big real estate deal in the near future, and just enjoying the time where my kids still want me around.
I love it. Share with me one thing that surprised you in your journey.
How fragile everyone was.
Tell me
Everyone,
more.
everyone. I think when you go out into the world and you gun for big things, you're so grateful to get into the room or get a seat at the table. And I think you train yourself to be hyper ready for the boardroom or for whatever it is. But if you pay attention, the people who seem to have it all figured out are just people. Whether it's the person you're dating, the person you're marrying, the mother-in-law, the CEO, the chairman of the board, whatever it is, when you look back on it, everybody was so fragile. Their egos were so fragile. And if you can see that, you won't take what they do as personally. If I could have gone back, I wouldn't have seen so much of what they did as personal, but I also just would have been gentler with myself all along and would have let go of the ghost of the need for cognitive dissonance much, much earlier, you know?
I hear you. I hear you. What is one tip or piece of advice you have for other leaders who are listening in to us today?
Mm. If it's not going to matter in 7 years, it doesn't matter. Because if you think about it, something about there's a magic number seven, right? And it goes to science and it goes into tons of religions and
Yeah,
everything like that. 7 years is a medium longish period of time. So when you think as a leader, what's the decision I'm going to make for this team right now? You got, let's say you're the MD and you've got 5 associates under you and you've got to decide who to promote. 7 years from now, they're going to remember the way you handled the situation and the way you messaged to everybody
yeah,
and the way you managed their fallout and the extent to which you saw them as much as who you promote, right? 7 years from now, if you quit that job, guess what? All the people that work with you right now, they won't remember the day you quit. They won't remember what you did next. They'll remember, cheesy, the way you made them feel, right?
100%.
You'll remember if you felt at peace for those 7 years. So if you're doing something that you think you're going to erase, but it's counter to who you want to be, who you want to message to your grandchildren, it matters. It'll matter in 7 years, it'll matter in 30 years. But if you're doing something where you think, I'll be at peace with this, come what may, 7 years is a medium horizon, I think you're going to be fine.
I love that. I love that. Well, Puna, thank you so much for joining me across the park today.
Thank you for having me.
And we're probably going to have to meet up somewhere in the city and have some coffee or something,
Anytime.
another nice morning latte.
We'll do the pumpkin. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful fall day in Manhattan.
Exactly. And I truly appreciate the work you're doing, the difference you're making, and your leadership and your approach to it. It truly warms my heart. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
And listeners, this is what I say at this point in the show. Take a deep breath in. Think about one piece of this conversation that is your takeaway, your aha moment. Jot it down somewhere. There's no judgment if you use a pen and paper, if you put it in some sort of electronic, nobody really cares. This is for you, whatever works for you. But look at that and then make a decision with one action you're going to take. Every time you listen to her success story and every time you take one action, every week we are here 52 weeks a year, you will take yourself forward, your life forward, your businesses forward, your careers forward, wherever you are. But I promise you, you will go forward. Thank you for listening. If this was a helpful conversation, share it forward to somebody. We come into your great podcast apps every Monday with great, fresh guests like Puna today. And so thank you for joining us here at Her Success Story, and I'll see you next time.